Welcome back to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today I have Jessie Eccles, and I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast to talk about this month's transits because I know a lot of people have sort of been talking about this month's transits, revving up for it. And it's like, just, I know within my astro knowledge, I'm just like scratching the surface of like what's happening. But I know like at a deep level, I've been feeling it. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to weave in the human design and astrology of the month. So for anybody who doesn't know you, if you want to just give a quick background, I'll also link the last episode you were on. I think it was about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, but I'll
I
link
was
that in the show
wondering when
notes
that
too.
was. I feel
Yeah.
like, yeah, so much has probably changed for both of us since
Oh,
then. But
so
yeah,
much.
I'm Jessie. I'm an astrologer and I also do human design readings, but I'm learning so much from you. So I'm so happy that we're gonna get to both like use both our skills to kind of integrate this all. But yeah, I'm sure when I was on the podcast last time, I probably didn't even know I was pregnant if I was pregnant.
Mm.
But I now have a baby as well, a second baby that's in my lap right now, and that's if I'm looking down if you see this. So I'm also a mom, and that's I have a 2-year-old and yep, he's going to be on this, and a 3-month old. Um, and that's been a big part of my life more recently. But a big part of what I do in my astrology work is work with the transits in my readings and my courses, because I feel like it really grounds us into our current lived experiences and cycles. And so that's been a big game changer for me personally in how I use astrology, but also in how I work with my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. And I just recently, I think within the last year, really started tracking the transits. And it's just been so helpful. And especially with human design, understanding if you don't have a defined sacral and then you have an energy that is defining that for you, right? And then you're spending like Pluto, right? It spends X amount of years in each sign. And so then you have this activated whatever, like right now it's in the root, right? So if you have an undefined root, Pluto is activating your root center, for the next however many years it's going to be in Aquarius, or in that gate 60. But so anyway, so it's fascinating. So I would love
It's
to start.
wild. I think about that astrologically too. Like it's gonna
Mhm.
be an Aquarius. Like my older son, he's 2. Anyone born in like February 2021 has a ton of Aquarius, which is not like it's ruled by Uranus. It's not typically Plutonian energy, but they're gonna live their first 20 years with Pluto
Yeah.
in their sign, like chilling. So it just like in human design, it still impacts you so dramatically wherever it is for a long period of time.
Hmm. How long? So I know it takes like 280 years, right, to completely go through the zodiac. Am I similar?
Yeah, and it is a range because just like every planet, Pluto does station retrograde, and so it
Mm.
varies a little bit. So it's been in Capricorn since 2008. And I don't know how many years it's been since 2008. So whatever that
It's
math
been a
is.
few.
And then it's going to be in Aquarius until 2044, so about 20 years.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
It's like between 15 and 30 years. It's actually like a pretty big range.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll never experience our own Pluto return.
No, no. I mean,
I mean, maybe.
unless something
Yeah,
wild
right.
happens with Pluto and Aquarius, which, hey, I'm here for it.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, I don't know if you want to start there or if you want to start, we have passed the ingress from Saturn into Pisces. So I don't, wherever you want
Let's
to
start there.
begin.
Let's start with Saturn. That's a big
Okay.
one.
Cool.
Yeah. And a
All right.
more like we will have a Saturn return as opposed to we won't have a Pluto
Yes.
return.
Yeah. So Saturn just moved into Pisces on March 7th. And yeah, if you want to describe that transit a little bit, we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Saturn changes signs about every 2.5 years. Again, it's a planet that stations retrograde. But Saturn was in Aquarius really since the beginning of whatever we want to call it, COVID, the pandemic. Like that was the last 2.5 years. That's when Saturn moved into Aquarius. So that's like a big chunk of time and a big um, end of a cycle that we're kind of wrapping up in different ways. And my goal here in this podcast is to make it apply more to like the individual and not talk about as much like crazy collective stuff, but there's a lot of crazy collective stuff with it. But with Saturn moving into Pisces, we have the planet of responsibility, discipline, structure in the sign of everything opposite that, like no boundaries, no structure, complete openness, like at no energetic boundaries, super, emotional, sometimes in the best ways, but sometimes in this like unable to confine ways. And so with Saturn moving into Pisces, it's not really comfortable in Pisces, but I think it's going to be has the opportunity to be a really beautiful transit because it provides structure in parts of our lives that don't have it. And so I think that, can be really helpful, especially I'm talking to a lot of people like with Pisces moons, like, oh my gosh, Saturn's moving into like where my moon is. What am I going to do? And I feel like that's going to actually provide a lot of nice structure to your emotional body where typically is quite open. But you know, with it too, it's like this theme that comes up for me is we have the ability to make our dreams a reality. And we've also had Neptune in Pisces for a while. So Neptune's very comfortable in Pisces. And it's really interesting looking back at Saturn and Neptune cycles with this. And I think we may even want to record several episodes around this because Saturn's going to be in Pisces for until 2026. So it's going to be there for a while. It just happens to move there this past week on March 7th. But though Neptune is the planet of dreams, illusions in the sign of dreams, and Saturn gets to allow us to kind of buckle down, take responsibility, and take action towards those dreams. And so that is really like where I see a lot of growth for people, a lot of increase in like people moving towards their spirituality businesses, actually taking action on a lot of things that they've like kind of said that they're going to do. Yeah, I meditate, but I haven't taken that next step into, whatever aspect of my spiritual practice. And so people, I think, are really going to be able to start taking responsibility and kind of like hunker down towards reaching some of those more like expansive, like really big dream goals that feel unattainable. So that's my favorite thing about this transit coming up. But there's a lot of other kind of like crazy stuff with it too that I'll kind of pause there. But I don't know. How are you feeling with Saturn moving into Pisces?
So I have Jupiter and Pisces in the 8th house. So I feel like I gave up alcohol in September. And so sort of Pisces always brings up this theme of alcohol addiction, codependence for me, right? And so I felt like I have sort of been it's just been bringing up a lot more of those shadows. Like I went out for dinner the other night and I was seeing people drink wine and I was like, ooh, should I have a glass of wine? You know what I mean? It was just sort of like that shadowy aspect of it. But as far as like business and what you said really like triggered something too, because it's like we have like a lot of spiritual based businesses now. And it's like I think there's been this paradigm shift where we're like, run your business and flow and people will come to you and all these sort of things. But then I think Saturn is really going to help propel that because it's like we still need the structure within that, right? Like we still need the boundaries within that. And I think when you have a spiritual based business, and I know I speak for myself, like it's so easy to want to give everything to people, right? Because like I want to help people. I want to help you understand yourself and come to self-love. And I want you to be in tune with your body and all these things. But yet we have to remember it is still a business, right? Like I saw your stories last night, right?
I was
About
gonna say,
money.
I just went on a rant on this.
Yes. And it's true because like it is easy to have that blurriness of the line between that. And it's like we want to provide a value and we want to like, I always think like for me, like I would give it all away for free, but yet I want to do this my full time. So it's like you have to bring in the element of money and you have to face those shadows that come with it too. So as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, Saturn can really help those spiritual based businesses during this time really create that structure around like what they like need to be. Because yeah, it's hard sometimes.
Totally, totally. And I think, Saturn and Pisces aren't innately about money, but it's interesting coming off of the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. So we've had that cycle the last 18 months and that's transitioning into Aries and Libra. And so we're coming off of this cycle around what do we value? How do we process resources and money and that whole system. And I think there's a lot of general systems that'll also be changing. And we'll talk about that maybe with Pluto and Aquarius. But I think that can all be also really supportive to people like you and me in businesses like this moving forward.
Yeah. I've been doing like meditations, specifically tuning into planets. So this is nothing like I've read in books or anything like that, but I just find it really interesting to like tune into the energy of the planet psychically like that. It's just been really cool. And like half the time I'm like, is this even real? Am I making up in my mind? Like, I don't know. But I saw like Saturn as just like the judge, that sort of archetype, like, I guess like, what is it? Kronos, like that ancient mythology,
Yes.
like figure of like, sort of like that, like hunched over, like guy.
I think of it almost as like a principal, like an old principal in a school. Like, yeah.
Like that's how I see the energy of it. But yet I see Pisces as almost like Mother Nature, but I see it in a very soft, like Saturn is sort of like nurturing it almost like, come on, let's do this gently. Like was sort of like the vibe I got. So I know like Saturn has a lot of like darkness to it. And just like, I don't know, it's so interesting to me because I feel like Saturn, from what I've understood, was one of like the first planets like ancient times really perceived, right? And it had a lot of like darkness to it. So I mean, everything has light and darkness, right? But I think like whenever we look at Saturn, it's just like, oh my gosh, Saturn, like, all the struggles in our life. But again, like there's always wisdom and beauty on the other side of that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I have like a little bit different perspective on most of the negative things, quote unquote, because I'm like, yeah, change, growth, like, great. I'm here for it. Like, that's like I mean, that's so shown in my chart too. I'm like, yeah, let's get to the nitty gritty, and deal with it. And like, why else are we here to live life? So I'm like, yes, okay, what are the lessons? Like, I was pumped for my Saturn return. I'm honestly excited. Pluto's about to move over my moon, and that's not like a super easy transit at all. But I'm like, all right, like I'm here to figure it out. And so I think it's part of it's about perspective, but Saturn does have like just like any planet, we have such a need for it. Of course we need structure. Like you can't have the feminine without the masculine. We know that. And it's the same with Saturn. And to have that in such a spiritual, like open, lack of boundary sign that's like is so intuitive, to actually make us like take responsibility for our intuition, for our spirituality, I think really beautiful and divine timing in like the era we're in right now.
Yeah, I feel like I've been feeling that spiritual side of it big time. So like again, Jupiter and Pisces in my 8th house, and then
I love that placement.
I know, and then my moon's in my 12th house. So spirituality,
Okay.
like when I actually came into having a spiritual practice, I felt so much more grounded, like within my energy, and better able to like deal with my emotions and all those things, you know, all the depth and darkness. Cause like there are places that I go that are dark, right, in my mind. And
Sure.
because I think just having that expansion, like limelight on that. So yeah, I've definitely been feeling that, and I love that so much. And then Saturn is currently in gate 5 in human design, and gate 5 is the gate of the spirit, right? So it is literally here to be provoked by the other to show us something about ourselves, right? The shadow side of that is victimization, though. And so it is this, you know, and that's very Piscean, right? That blaming, that victim, the codependence. And so it's really like moving through that. There are two, when you look at the gene keys, what I love the gene keys because it has two different expressions of the shadow. And so it really gives you like a polarity of how you might experience that energy. And so with gate 55, it's complaining or it's blaming, right? So it's sort of like that drama aspect of like, you know, you go to work and you're just like complaining about your boss, your coworkers, whatever, and then also blaming, right? I see that play out so much with my kids, right? It's like, who made this mess? Oh, they did. Oh, you know what I mean? Or, oh my gosh, it's so annoying. So and so did that, you know. And it's never taking responsibility. Of course, they're children, they're learning, but that's sort of like that energy that comes to mind with it. And one of the quotes that's in the Gene Keys, he says, it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you handle it, right? And that's that element of the spirit. So when we're provoked, you know, when that gate 39, which is in the root center, provokes the gate 55, it's funny because like everybody in my I have gate 55 in my Venus, and everybody in my family has gate 39. So I'm like, you are all here to provoke me, for me to learn something about myself.
Great. Yeah. I mean, amazing, but yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And my son has it in his conscious sun. So he's literally walking around provoking people. He's just like poking the bear all the time. He does that to me, literally. And I just have to remember, I'm like, this is just what he's here for.
Yeah.
Thank
you, universe.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's kind of like coming back, you know, when we are provoked in that sense, and it is showing us something about ourselves. It's easy to not face that. And it's easy to be like, well, you're doing this, you know, like I could easily send my son to his room and be like, stop doing that. Like, you know what I mean? Like you acted like this, but it's also like, yes, he's 6 and he needs to learn lessons, but it's also, I'm being triggered by this. What's this showing me about me? Right. So it's taking responsibility for our emotions and what's coming up, as opposed to just, and in that we are heightening our awareness, right? We're creating more awareness and consciousness within ourselves.
And that's like the high road and low road of Saturn and Pisces too, because it's like taking responsibility versus that escapism route, or versus that victimhood route. And you mentioned this too, but a big thing with Pisces is, and especially for Saturn and Pisces people that are moving into Saturn return, there can be a lot around escapism tendencies, and whether that's alcohol, drugs, Netflix, like whatever thing that you do to escape. And it can even be like, toxic spirituality. Like there are other, like there's so many ways that can look. And I think the big thing is taking responsibility and like self accountability and how you react to that. And I've seen a lot of stuff, like all my whole feed now is like parenting stuff, because that's just like my life these days. But you know, we all experience trauma to some level, and how we actually, you know, two children could experience the exact same external event, but how their parents react to that is actually how they internalize that as trauma or not, to an extent, you know, depending on the situation, of course. But I think, yeah, to your point, like how you're reacting to your son is also triggering you. So like, how can you hold that space for him so he's not also internalizing that as trauma, and then as an adult he can also learn how to take responsibility for, you know, his actions too.
Yeah. And I work with him a lot with, so he's a Scorpio rising, Mars in Scorpio, and his son's in the 8th house. So I work with him a lot with just expressing his emotions. So now he'll come to me sometimes, be like, Mom, I'm just so frustrated right now. I'm like, okay, cool. At least you're not throwing a chair. Like, we can
Yeah.
work with this.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely an element of it sometimes.
But yeah, naming it, yeah, helping him
Mm-hmm.
process it, and finding different coping mechanisms, ways to process
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. We used to have, when he was younger, we used to have the face chart on the fridge. I don't know if you've seen that or use it with your son, but like,
Okay.
so he'll get mad before he could even verbalize things. And I would take him and I'd be like, what are you feeling? Right. And he'd be able to point to the happy face or point to the angry face or point to the frustration or whatever it is, the silly, you know? And so that, I think
Yeah.
doing that when he was super young allows him to now, like as he's 6 and like kind of moving through things, be able to like really identify what he's feeling as
I
opposed to just being
love
like, I don't
that.
know what's going on. Cause he's got an undefined solar plexus too. So yeah.
Good stuff. I mean, that sounds like such a cool chart, but also I know that can be a lot. Yeah, my
Mm-hmm.
boys both have Pisces moons, so I
Oh
definitely should
yeah.
get that face chart
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, they will definitely be feeling it all, huh?
Uh-huh.
That's sweet. Okay. So where do you want to go from here? Do we want to go to Pluto, Mars?
Let's do a quick stop at Jupiter.
Yeah, got it.
So when this comes out, I think the transit will just be ending. But we do have Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Aries, like it's March 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th or so. But also, even if it's not directly conjunct, Jupiter and Chiron are both in Aries for a little bit before Jupiter moves into Taurus in a couple months. And Jupiter it's opposite Saturn in terms of like it gets this really great reputation. It's abundance, it's like expansion, it's opportunities, but also wherever it is, it does expand. And so for you in the eighth house, like you're familiar with it potentially expanding places that you don't love expanding.
Mhm.
And so Jupiter and Chiron is our wounds, but it's also where we have the greatest opportunity for healing. So I just think this is a really beautiful transit, especially for the time that we're in right now, because and again, I like the nitty gritty, like I like the icky stuff. So it is going to expand wounds, but it's also a really expansive time for healing. And so it allows you, if you've been working on healing, it kind of helps catapult you into that like next level of being able to put yourself first and honor yourself and stepping into your power in Aries, which is also where the eclipses will be moving. So very aligned in that kind of cycle. But the flip side, if there's anything that you've been like pushing down, burying, haven't been dealing with, or moving into victimhood or blaming others, Jupiter will help make sure that like that doesn't happen as well, and kind of will open that wound extra if it's something that you felt like ignoring. But it is something that I think really, it's one of those cliche things, but it is happening for us, not to us. And so as much as you can lean into that and lean into the healing opportunities that it does provide, then I think it's really going to set us up for a more exciting time with Saturn and Pisces, Pluto and Aquarius, and all of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for human design, I was trying to see when so I wrote down, it changes, 316. So it'll be right after that transit. But during that transit, it's in gate 21. And gate
Okay.
21 is the gate of control, the hunter huntress, right? It's about like, it's like, can you control for like the word control is kind of funny, but it's like stepping into that space without like controlling a person, but it's like using it for people, right? Like
Mm.
stepping into that leadership position, because it's all about the tribe, right? So it's like resources, the tribe, things like that. And just like really kind of, and it's just going to be expanding that. But of course, like you said, with Chiron, expanding the shadow sides of control, right? Where it's like this hierarchy thing, and you're coming in and you're just like, like trying to control everything and making sure everything goes a certain way. So yeah, like you said, kind of expanding on whichever side is going to be coming up, right? What you haven't faced. Yeah.
Totally.
And then it moves into gate 51 on the 16th. So that'll be just a few days, because it's the 12th, right? Yeah. So it'll be just a few
Mhm.
days after that. And gate 51 is the gate of shock. So it's our ability to withstand shock and also to shock others. And so the shadow of that is that agitation. It's the duality of that is the cowardly or hostile reaction, or repressive nature. It's all about competition, and it can create deep insecurities. So again, like with Jupiter expanding on those things, right? Like it's like it can either unite people or create a lot of division. So it's like, which path are you going to go with Jupiter? Are you going to expand on the unity, or are we going to separate ourselves within that? And fear, because it is very competitive in its nature, fear is an underlying theme there of the shadow. So again, are we expanding on the fear, or are we able to move past that, create awareness, and then like kind of step into the unifying element of it?
I love that. That's so aligned for this whole month. All of these shifts happening at once is moving towards like, I just feel like maybe I'll get a little woo here. We're just like about to pick what timeline we want in a way, right? And it's that I feel like that gate right there explains like which one are we going to pick, and we kind of get to pick right now. And that's why I think it's so important we all take like self responsibility, self accountability in our own healing and our own like individual needs, and that will help hopefully collectively like pick that higher road for all the gates, all of the energies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love you said that, because I've heard that a few times and it really resonates, right? Where it's like we are being shown these possibilities right now. And
Yeah.
I know, like, personally, I'm definitely feeling that, but and maybe this is just where I've come in my own evolution of myself, but I don't feel as afraid of that as I would have before, right? Like, I feel like my belief in myself and my path and my journey is a lot stronger than like even 2 years ago. I'd been like, still like racked by like self doubt and low self worth. And now I just
Yeah.
feel like I've gotten to a point where I'm like, no, I'm absolutely possible. It's possible for me to choose this timeline as opposed to continuing to go down the same path. So it's really cool.
I'm gonna pop him back on real quick.
Okay.
um yes, yeah. And that though that is a shift, and so many more people are shifting that way. And I think we do have like Saturn in Aquarius to thank for that to an extent, because it is like this part of the whole idea, right? Like we are individually part of the whole, and it's not selfish to take responsibility on our individual spiritual journeys. Like that is what then trickles out and impacts the collective. Like how many times have you heard of like, if all these people meditate, then we can help like provide healing, as opposed to just one person meditating and providing that healing. It's like individually we can all make a difference on like the greater collective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, okay, so then we move into, or is there anything else that you wanted to say about Jupiter, Chiron, anything?
Nope.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So Mars, we've had Mars in Gemini since October, right? I believe it went in
Yeah.
October.
Yeah.
So
Super
this is,
long time for Mars to be in one sign.
yeah.
Rare.
And I perceived Mars, or I understood Mars in Gemini to really be like a war of the mind, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
Gemini is intellect, it's communication, it's all those things. And like Mars is, assertion. And so I feel like this might be a time where it's sort of going to give us a little bit of break of like the chaos that's maybe gone on inside. But if you want to speak to this transition into Cancer and how that's going to affect us.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's a big deal for many reasons. Mars, similar to Saturn in a way, it kind of gets that a little bit of like the low road energy kind of comes to light a lot more. So it is aggression, it is assertion, but it's how we exert our energy. It's like where we kind of focus our energy, how we transmute that energy. So, we're all going to be feeling certain feels and it's all going to be different, but like, how do we then process that and let that out into the world? And so Mars is kind of that channel of how we kind of get it out. And so we're all still going to experience that differently. But yeah, with that focus in Gemini since October, it has been a war of the mind, of truth, of facts. Gemini is the details, where Sagittarius is kind of more the big picture philosophy. Gemini is facts. It's truth. They're both truth, but it's like, how are we going to memorize like, the colors? How are we going to memorize the signs? It's like those facts. And so it's put some kind of confusion and reflection on what really is truth, what really is fact. And Gemini also represents social media in different ways. And we've seen so many ups and downs in how we interact with social media. Social media is also just like new. It's new within our lifetime, which is wild. And so Mars and Gemini, I think, also allowed us to kind of reflect on like the internet and social media and how we like transmute and exchange information as a whole. And so that's been a big theme over the last 6 months. And it makes sense to me that Mars spent so much time in Gemini in the time that we're in. But moving into Cancer, it moves to the Cancer's our emotions, but it's also like the home, the mother, our ancestral lineage. And I see a big focus shifting into the home in a lot of different ways. And I think that can be really beautiful, because similarly to like taking care of yourself helps kind of take care of the collective, like taking care of your home I think is where it starts. Like all things we want the collective kind of to be in the future, which Pluto and Aquarius, like we're moving into this new future, like it starts in the home, right? And so how can we put our focus and energy into how we want our home to be so that that can kind of like trickle out. But I also think it's going to be like a war of the home, just like it's a war of the mind. So I think there's going to be some conflict on, where are those boundaries between like what someone else can say we can do in our home versus what, we want, and those types of things collectively as well.
That makes sense. How do you see that playing out as like within parenting, like if you're parenting children, right? Because it's like we are raising like in the home, right? We're raising these kids to be like a different way. And so I'd just be curious.
Yeah, I mean, well, my mind just went a lot of way with like a lot of the different transits going on, but I think it's beautiful in that we do have the opportunity to put a focus in our home. And it is interesting, especially, when you're talking about like having a business versus a home, those are polarities in astrology. Like your public image, your career is the opposite of your home and your family. And you can have both, but this allows us, I think, to help put a focus on that. And for me, that's a great permission slip right now, honestly, to be able to put that energy and that focus into the home, and hopefully like that allows me to support the other aspects of my life as well. But I think too, it's like the flip, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean children, like it's home and family and ancestral, and like we see a lot of themes right now, where people are talking about like breaking generational curses and karma and like all of these things. And I do think that we are the generation that's here to do that, and I think that Mars in Cancer can kind of help put a focus on some of that as well, whether we're conscious of it or not. I think so many more parents are taking action to like, wait, I was like, whether it's just going to therapy, like I was raised this way, like, oh, that's why, even though I love my parents, like I know why I have that insecurity. Like, how can I, change that for my children? And we're still all gonna, affect our children in the ways we're gonna affect our
Mm-hmm.
children. Like there's no getting out of that, but really being able to raise them in a much more like allow them to be much more empowered and, in touch with their emotions and in touch with all of the other gifts that they do have, as opposed to just like kind of putting their head down into school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, even just like astrology and human design is so supportive in like actually seeing our children as they are designed to be. And it's such a huge support in raising them. But like you said, of course, like my daughter like wants none of it. She's just like, she's on the total opposite. And it's like we're creating these our children are always going to resist us in some way, right? And so whether you're giving them too much freedom or no freedom, it's always I think it's just the parent child dynamics and everything that goes along with that, right? So we can only do what we can do, and we all do the best that we can with what we have. But yeah, and as you were speaking too, that's what I was thinking. It was that having that home life support the career, right? Because I think a lot of us like completely separate the two, or they think they can't like combine. And even for me, like as I've been seeing, like even with you, right, with your son now, and there's someone else in astrology that I look who has a child that often comes in, right? And it's like it's not being so structured and like like throwing your kids out of the room, or you know what I mean, when it comes to like your business and being able to like actually show up as like a conscious parent and be like, okay, this is my right, like you're working from home and you're a mom, and allowing the two to sort of come together.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, this is like, I guess, weirdly triggering for me to have him here because I am so like business focused, and like my career has been such a big part of my life in many different ways. And I was like, oh, of course he needs me right now. Like, but I'm trying to really like loosen up and allow for that space and be someone that, yeah, like other people can see, kind of start to integrate that. Like, throughout the past couple of years, so many more people are working from home. And it, there's certain things like I wish I could, 100% focus on this, which I am, but it's like I still am so lucky to be able to have like the opportunity to have my kid here. And I think it's cool for them to also see these aspects of our lives. Like I remember, I'm gonna not go on too much of a tangent here, but I remember growing up and like my dad going to work and being like, literally have no idea what he does, have no idea, just like it's just kind of this like, yeah, he leaves the house for a period of time and comes back, and like I'm just now understanding, what he does and why he did that, where it's like now they kind of get to see, oh, I'm passionate about this. Oh, this is something that's supporting our family. Oh, and I think that's just a cool thing to be able to help them like see their mom as a whole person as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's also showing them like, as they get older too, it's like that you can do full time what you're passionate about, right? You can follow your dreams and you can make that a reality. And, my kids, they know, like, cause I'm like constantly on calls at night and on the weekends and whatever. And they're just like, well, is this like a serious call, or is this like, can I watch TV in the living room kind of call? They're like
I love
discerning what
that.
it is. But that's what, before I got in here, they're like, is this a serious call? I'm like, well, let's just go to our rooms and behave and we'll go for lunch after. You know what I mean? But again, to be able to have them here, like I said, I used to like ship them off to my parents, and it was like I was just not seeing them for so many times during the week. And I'm a single mom, right? And so it's like I want to be able to be available for them and them not feel like you can't be a part of what I do outside of our house, right? Like it is one cohesive thing. And so, yeah, I have Pluto in my 4th house. So it's a lot of like restructuring and like
your
right,
natal
like,
Pluto. Yeah.
Yeah, my natal Pluto is in my 4th house in Scorpio. So I'm just sort of like, that's just a piece that always comes up for me. And of course, like ancestral stuff in my family of origin, it's always sort of been an element. So yeah.
Yeah. You can definitely say you're someone breaking generational trauma.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even like as a parent, I feel like I parent very differently. Like I was never really like, I love my kids so much, but I was never really the child that was like, oh, I can't wait to be a mom. Right. Like I feel like I am that sort of like different, like someone at work was like, oh, can you talk to all of your, what do you call it? Like carpool mom friends. I was like, I don't have any. You know what I mean?
I relate.
Yeah. It's like I go to work and then I have this outside of it and then I do my kids, and it just doesn't really create space for me to be engaged in that way. But then it brings up triggers for me where I feel like other parents reflect, I don't know it, right? Like they're not interested in being friends with me, or I'm just like different. And so then it's confusing. So it's a whole thing. But again, Pluto right there, right? Where it's just like sort of having to just like reinvent my own wheel with that and just like let all of the labels and stigmas and all that crumble and just be like, no, this is the way I'm going to do it. My kids love me. I love my kids. We're all happy. We're good. I ask them every day. I'm like, you guys happy? They're like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, then I'm doing something right. So we can like move on.
Amazing. I love that. I'm learning so much from you as a parent.
Yeah. I mean, I try, like you said, we all mess up in some way, and our kids are always going to get some trauma from us from something, right? Like everybody's different. I always say like each child has a different parent, right? Mm-hmm. Same parent, but they're react just energetically, right? Look at human design, just from energetic level, we interact differently with our kids. So, we can just do the best that we can. But then, so going back to Mars, Mars is in gate, let me see, 310. Today's the 11th, right? Yeah. My mind.
The 11th. I only know that because it's on my computer right now.
Okay. So it moved into gate 12, which is in the throat, and it's the gate of caution. It's attached to the gate of grace, which is gate 22 in the solar plexus. And so this is really just like, I see that as like being a little bit more cautious about how we're expressing ourselves, right? Like how we're using that assertion and that aggression and all that stuff, like just sort of like discerning that a little bit. And then it moves into gate 15 on the 22nd. And so gate 15.5, Ra says, is like, it's like the channel of life, right? It's the gate of extremes, and it's the gate of like patterns, right? It's cyclical. And so it's really important to like have that dynamic of both. But like gate 15 in itself is the gate of extremes. So, which to me seems like such a very Aries and Mars energy to just like be like completely going the extreme one way or the other. It does need to have that balance of gate 5, right? So gate 5 is the patterns, the cycles. And so then you want to have that both ways, right? To sort of like pull it out of that, to switch things up, because the only thing guaranteed in life is change. So if you're fixed in your pattern, it's so hard to change. And then change is going to throw you off. But then if you're full of change in the extremes without having the grounding of a fixed pattern, then you can just be like off in who knows where, because the shadow of gate 15 is dullness. Like it's that fear of being bored or dull or like complacent in life. So then it goes to all these extremes. So of course it's like having that balance of a healthy, expression of those extreme energies.
I feel like that is kind of Cancer energy too, though, because Cancer's quite, I mean, it's water. So it is that kind of like nice feminine, and it's a mom. It's like, it sounds so nurturing, but Cancer is moody, right? Like it is up and down. It's the ocean, it's water, like how high the waves go, and then it can be completely calm, right? Like it's interesting how that kind of translates.
Mm-hmm. Well, gate 15 is Cancer. It would be, because it is in Cancer at that point, right?
Right.
On the 20, what did I just say? The 22nd. Yeah.
22nd. Yeah. Yeah. You were just kind of talking about the Aries energy too, but it's like interesting because we think of Aries as like, I don't know, not dramatic, but just like that aggressor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like this extreme, but Cancer's like extreme in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Cancer's just that like up and down.
Yeah.
high highs, low lows.
When I first started learning astrology, or maybe it was before I even learned astrology, like I always thought Cancer was just this nurturing motherly thing, right?
That's what I mean.
And then and then I met Cancer suns and I'm like, wait, you are so cold, right? Like, or just like not appear to be non-emotional, right? And it's like they're in that shell, and it's like with
it's a crab.
When they don't let you in, it's like, are you like, literally, I'm like, are you even a Cancer? Like, but as I've obviously deepened my knowledge of astrology, now I can understand and see. And of course, there's so much more that plays into that in the natal chart, but there are elements of that Cancer that are just very much not that typical archetype of like the mother.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so moving into Pluto. Pluto moves into Aquarius on
March 23rd.
March 23rd. Yeah. So if you want to talk, that's my dad's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday. Yeah, so Pluto, it moves into Aquarius March 23rd for the first time since 1778.
Wow.
And we don't need to do a huge history lesson there, but that's a big freaking deal in America and Europe. And so you can just Google those dates if you want. But very revolutionary energy. And we'll talk about Pluto in Aquarius, but just like date wise, Pluto will station retrograde and it will go back into Capricorn. So we get this like tease, I guess, like kind of this taste, this feeling of what Pluto and Aquarius will feel like, but it will move back into Capricorn, which is also a very big deal for a couple of reasons. And we'll probably talk about that maybe in a future podcast when it comes in a couple months. And then it will move back into Aquarius in 2024 for 20 years. So again, we kind of get this like blip. It's from March until June that we'll get this kind of blip of Pluto and Aquarius energy. Actually, let me pull up exact dates. What is it? I thought I had this up. I don't. Retrograde May 1st. So Pluto stations retrograde May 1st and re-enters Capricorn for its final time on June 11th. Yep, where it remains in the sign for the rest of the year. Okay, I was right, June. So June 11th. But yeah, so during this Pluto and Aquarius period, we're gonna start, and we've already kind of like, I feel like started getting a little bit of a taste of it, but Aquarius it's all this like weird stuff. Aquarians are weird. They're eccentric. It's people who like to kind of like do things their own way. They're innovative. It also represents freedom. And it also is where we see a lot of stuff around like technology and aliens and outer space and all of these like new technological advances and scientific discoveries. But with it as well, Pluto, it is the planet of transformation, of death and rebirth, of revolutions, and it's always somewhere. So everywhere, every minute, every year, we're going through some type of transformation. So it doesn't have to be like scary at all. But with it moving into Aquarius and with it being such like a poignant, like piece of our collective history as well, I really do think it's going to be revolutionary in how we live, especially after the last couple years of so much being unearthed. And with its retrograde back into Capricorn, I think that is going to also really bring up and close up a lot of loops that have kind of started to be exposed over the last couple of years and bring more clarity around that. But yeah, with Pluto and Aquarius, like we can expect revolutionary ideas, revolutionary ways of living, new ways to do business and motherhood, new ways to live in community. Community is a big, big word with this as well, I think, because we're moving kind of from this more like hierarchical system and like relying on big business, relying on big banks, getting rid of all those structures and moving into this, like, how can we actually, like, it takes a village, like, we don't live in a world that we have that village to support us, right? Like we used to be able to, mother and have so many people support us in so many different ways. And a lot of people do have friends that do that, but it's not a natural part of our society. We live in, households that maybe are single parent or maybe only one other parent, and two people can't do it all still. It really does take a village. So I think we're going to see a lot of transformation on how we also interact with our community, how we like move through like resources, like more kind of getting food locally, getting just support locally as opposed to relying on things like Amazon. And that's going to take time to get there, but we're going to get a taste of that over the next couple months as Pluto moves into Aquarius. The other, like, I guess, cool, interesting thing, I don't work a ton with like degrees, but that's actually where human design kind of comes in. But because it's transitioning signs and Pluto's so slow moving, it's been chilling at 29 degrees Capricorn, and it's going to be at its entire time in Aquarius. This year in 2023, it's going to be at 0 degrees Aquarius. Both of those are critical degrees and just really important in closing cycles and starting. So we really are at this massive, massive shift collectively where we are ending an old cycle and starting a new cycle. Plus it's in Aquarius, which is just wildly innovative, things we've never seen before. Like the future, I truly believe it's going to be something that none of us can really even fully put words to yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you say, because it's technology too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know if you see my Instagram stories, but I just like bought a thing called Healy, right?
Healy,
And it's
yes.
like,
I actually want to know more about
yeah,
that.
it's fascinating because it's like it's frequency, it's sending you frequency, but like in the quantum field, right? So it's
That
like
is Pluto and Aquarius.
This,
Heck
this
yeah.
technology that is so it's just literally it's blowing my mind. Right. But that's what I was thinking of as you're saying that. I mean, it's like this new like technology that's coming out that this specific device has only been around for 2 years. Right. So it's just in the beginning phases of like this
Saturn and
potential.
Aquarius, Saturn's been in Aquarius. So
Yeah.
these things have been built. Like we've had a lot of technological advances that some people don't even probably know it. Like we don't know about them all. They've been built by Saturn and Aquarius. And now Pluto's like, how are we going to like transform society with these? And again, there's a high road and low road to everything. So I hope it's for the better, but we're going to see a lot of, even just AI, like it's so wild to me. There's so much stuff associated with that.
Yeah. Two things. So somebody was showing me this because I don't really watch the news, but I guess there's this like robot thing that's been built by, I don't know if it was the CIA or something like that, but they're like using it to like, they're teaching it how to like build things and fight. And like, I was literally thinking of like all these like movies like Terminator and stuff. Right. But then when you look at, I've been reading a lot on Rudolf Steiner. I don't know if you're familiar with him and his works, but like he talks a lot about Atlantis, right? Like going back through like Atlantis time and Lemuria and stuff like that. And Atlantis was this critical point in like our obviously like history, but like ancient, like beyond like the timing of it like blows my mind because it was so long ago. But like the downfall of Atlantis was technology, like misusing technology. It was different than it is now. It was more like mental, like sort of like technology, but either way. So it's like, are we going to be repeating the same
That's
thing?
exactly where we're at.
Something different. Yeah. So I think a lot of that, and I think like, again, going into the woo-woo side of things, but I think a lot of the souls now are karmically from the time of Atlantis because we're coming to repeat and relearn and choose different paths. And so it's like this time is just it's a different epic in time that's like repeating itself. And it's like, what are we gonna do from here?
Yeah, it's so many things you just said are so interesting to me. And yeah, I agree 100%. I also don't watch the news, but I like will get set things like, look at this, like, yeah, like full human being. And even, I didn't even know what chat AI or something. I don't know. There's some like chat thing now that can write like full papers and like, you can just spit out, like, I don't even know what this is, but all of that is super cool and like efficient, but also terrifying. And we have to figure out with both Saturn and Pisces and Pluto moving into Aquarius, like with those energies combined, it is no surprise like that we are where we're at in humanity. And I do think we're right at that point where, like, to compare to Atlantis, like we're getting to pick if we want to use technology like correctly or live in this total delusional world.
Yeah. And not to be like doom and gloom or anything like that, but like the earth, Mother Nature, Gaia is always inevitably going to win. Right. So it's like we can continue on this path. But I think like a lot of these transits, like, even with North Node and Taurus, right, it is showing us like where we need to revisit like our food sources and things like that. And I think Saturn and Pisces too, like even like revving up to this, and it's like everything that's happened. Again, I'm not super familiar with what's going on, but like these explosions, and it's been contaminating the water. And so we're having to
the water and the fish specifically, like, yeah.
It's crazy. And I think like I've recently, even the last like month or so, I've been, with my water filter, just like putting minerals and putting Himalayan pink salt in there because it's like we I don't know, just so much thing, but just from a body level, right? It's like we're told to drink all this water, but the water we're drinking is doing nothing for us. So it's leaving us more
Yes.
hydrated or dehydrated. So it's a whole thing. But but I think of that too with this whole like transition. But as far as like human design, so Pluto is in gate 60, which is in the root center, and it's the gate of acceptance. And so it's opposite of gate 3. And so for me, it's interesting. I have gate 3 in my north node. And so I have an undefined root center. So this Pluto is going to be activating my root center for the next however long that it's going to be in gate 60.
And your north node.
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh
it's
my gosh,
literally,
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah. So it's going to be bringing up a lot, but it's literally this pressure to mutate because gate 3 is making, it's like chaos in the beginning, right? It's taking all this chaos and mutating it and transforming it into something that makes sense. And so collectively, right, we're going through this process of, and because the root like is a motor, my kids are screaming, I don't know if you heard that, because it's a motor, it's like operating on a pulse almost, right? So like that's like the energy that's going to be coming through with Pluto in gate 60. And I'll have to look at how long it sits in gate 60 because I'm not exactly, I have it on 7 days view right now. Just because you said it's going to be going back and forth, and in human design gates like overlap when it's like new, right? So I'd have to look into it later, but yeah, I think
it is a bit of a chaotic time because Pluto, it's death and rebirth, and it wants things to, I'm gonna use the word destroy, but go away, right? Like there's this shedding. You can't build the new without the shedding. And I feel like we're in this shedding. We're in that in between. And there is going to be a little bit of back and forth where it's like feels chaotic and then it feels hopeful, and it feels chaotic and it feels hopeful. And it may feel like those things at the same time, but we're not going to have like super clarity until we start seeing Pluto actually moving into Aquarius, like in the coming years. But I think 2023 is going to be a little bit interesting with the back and forth.
Yeah. Well, like you said, like that 29-degree and 0 degrees, and that's all it's going to be in for this year. So that's crazy. But yeah. And it's also like just calling for a lot of patience, right? Because I think in that mutative process, you have to have patience and trust the process, literally,
Saturn
and
and Pisces is supporting us there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then just like that final piece in the shadow for that is limitation, right? So it's like, where are you falling in that? But yeah, and then I just wrote down trust the timing. And like you said, it's like beautiful. I think we're just being prepared for all of this, right? And I think depending on where you are, it's going to bring up a lot, right? It's going to bring up a lot of like the fears or the things that we're not seeing, or have you been doing the work? Are you going to be doing the work? Like, so I think there's a lot of people are waking up, I feel like. And maybe it's just because like I'm in that space, so that's more of what I see. But I do truly believe that a lot of people are waking up now.
I'm sure both. I think part of it is like, whoever is going to build a community that hopefully, supports where they're at as well. And that we're all going to be kind of at different spaces within that. But on top of that, absolutely, like with these transits, there's no way like more people aren't waking up. I mean, so many people, even in the last couple of years with Saturn moving to Aquarius, I think really started and initiated a lot of that because this all started, it started, whenever time's not even real, whatever, we can talk about all that. But like Saturn was conjunct Pluto in Capricorn before it moved into Aquarius. And that was a big deal. And that kind of like initiated, I feel like, so many people's awakening.
Yeah. So that's big. March is big. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't touch on astrologically that is important?
I think with it, so March is big. Like truly, when I started studying astrology and I started looking at transits, first of all, it's what made me feel validated in my own life, but also I was like, whoa, like March 2023. And so I feel like it puts a lot of pressure though too. But I just want to mention like there will be noticeable shifts collectively, but they're big, long transits. So it's, there may be scary things that happen. There may be really beautiful things that happen. There may be really like great aha moments, but it's not like on March 23rd, everything will change. Like, so I don't want to put a ton of pressure on it either. And I think it is just trusting the process, like taking a step back, like just breathing, being with your family or anyone that you love, and like being really present. Like it's nothing to fear, like that. I just never want to like instill fear in anyone with all of this. And it is a really big freaking deal, but also they're really long, slow transits. And so it's kind of this, it's like Pluto's like the undercurrent. Like it's like things have already been shifting. It's not like nothing's happened and then everything starts happening on March 23rd, right? It's like this big, deep undercurrent that has been happening for many, many years. So also don't like put too much pressure on yourself or the collective to just flip a switch and everything be great.
Yeah. And as I've been reading, like one of my favorite astrology books, like of specifically Saturn and Pisces, but I've been reading like this specific phrase in various different ways as it relates to a lot of them, but it's just like let go and let God. Right. And I think that
Yeah, I
that
just got the
having that
chills. Yeah.
trust and coming into yourself, and that's why I'm just such huge on meditation, right? And coming to my space and myself. And it's like whatever this, and I do feel like the transits have been super supportive in my journey because like for me like Scorpio season and Pisces season have traditionally in my life before I was aware were super chaotic. All of my
Yeah.
divorces have happened in Scorpio, right? Like all of my like addictive crazy like bingers and stuff have happened in Pisces. So it's so good to have the awareness now, right? And that's why I wanted to do this, right? To provide the support for people to understand like what's happening and not necessarily to live your life by, oh my gosh, this is happening on this day, but it creates an awareness, right? And so you
Yeah.
can be like, okay, now I can prepare for this or prepare sounds like really like, ooh, but just
Yeah.
having that in your mind and just, yeah, always coming back to yourself. I feel like it's just crucial, especially like as we're moving through all of this. And it's obviously, like you said, it's been happening, but coming
Yeah.
back to that.
Yeah, and to your point, like every individual chart's gonna look different as well. Like we're kind of talking about bigger collective themes, and you will feel that, but like you're gonna experience Scorpio different than I'm gonna experience Scorpio energy, and we're gonna experience Pluto differently, especially with it being your North Node. And so I assume most of your listeners probably like have their human design chart, probably have their astrology chart, and so it is important to look at like what house that is and what other planets you have, and it's going to the collective energy is always going to affect us, but I think yeah, taking that step back, taking that breath, and it's more I think validating than anything, knowing like you don't like we have so much societal pressure on what we should be doing, but it's like no, this is where I am, and that's where we can be like okay, yeah, the transits are explaining that, are showing that like I can give myself grace that like this is my journey, this is where I am, and I can lean into the high road of that energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been so
Thank
much fun,
you.
and I look forward to more of this. If you want to just let everyone know where they can find you, and then of course in the intro, I'll have everything in the show notes. I'll put in the intro how you can get your astrology chart, your human design chart, so as they listen through this episode, they can kind of like relate back to that.
Amazing. Yeah, Jessie Eccles is my Instagram, and everything's linked there. Right now I'm kind of transitioning my website, but everything's linked there for that.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Just as somebody walked in my room, they
So
made it to
funny.
like the hour point. They're like watching the time.
Yes.
Oh,
They've been
thank
sitting
you.
at your door.
Yeah, right.